Borderlands 3 is so bad. No, actually not really. Borderlands 3 is pretty good game, but when there are issues, you should point them out. And when you also have 3 prior games to compare to, you better make something amazing. And in some of the cases, Borderlands 3 missed rather than hit. And right now we're gonna discuss 3 main reasons why Borderlands 3 is actually quite bad. And no, despite you expecting, we are not gonna start with most obvious reason, but we're gonna start most important reason. And it is the reason of the gameplay. Borderlands has set bar really high. And in that game, farming and looting was probably one of the most important parts of the game. Not probably, it was the most important part. And the most important part, of course, was the end game and grinding for the legendary items. Legendary items felt genuinely special and coveted due to their scarcity. Players had to work hard, farm bosses, and complete challenging missions to obtain these prize weapons. This rarity heightened the excitement of some of the accomplishment when you finally found the legendary. And in contrast, Borderlands 3 is literally flooded with legendaries, which diminishes its value. Legendary drops is so common that it makes most players practically desensitized to it. It's so oversaturated that so many players are owning so many legendaries that, yep, you really kinda don't care about them anymore. But that's not all with legendaries. You see, in Borderlands 2, legendaries were quite unique and they were quite powerful weapons. But in Borderlands 3, legendary weapons often lacked the same level of creativity and uniqueness. Many legendaries felt like simple reskins of one another and carried very generic abilities. And in many cases, they were even packing the same punch as the non-legendary weapons, making them practically useless. And I'm not even talking about the addition of anointments, which also added some random additional stats and effects to the games, which they tried to make legendary weapons unique with that, but I think they made it even worse. Overall, when you screw up already pretty much perfect loot system, you kinda deserve a little bit of hate coming towards you. Yes, for many gamers this is not a big issue, but many players were hardcore Borderlands fans and they did not like the changes that were implemented, especially when the changes were worse than in a previous game. Oh, but that's not all. There's also one more thing that they did with the gameplay that was pretty bad. And it is with skill trees. But the problem did not lie with the skill trees itself. They were fine, they were nothing to be blown away with, but they were working pretty okay. The problem started with DLCs. Because what some of the DLCs and expansions did, they actually added additional character skill trees to existing characters. But you could only access it if you own the DLC. Do you see where is an issue here? By gating new skill trees behind the DLC paywalls, Gearbox basically created a fragmented player experience. Some players who did not want to purchase DLCs, and which were arguably pretty lackluster as well, missed out on some additional character options for the characters they actually played and loved. This approach actually separated player base into those with access to the full range of skill trees and those without, and this was in the same characters. It could be understood if it was a completely separate characters with completely separate skill trees, but come on, it was the same characters. The character skill trees are the crucial aspect of a game's core identity, and decision to add additional skill tree through the DLCs raises several concerns that affected the overall player experience. Fragmentation, unbalanced gameplay, disruptions in character progression, and missed opportunities for in-game achievements were among the issues that arose due to this approach. And this could have been completely avoided. But you know that those are not the worst things about the game. An absolute worst thing that pretty much everyone will agree with is the story and characters. Yes, Borderlands was never about an epic stories. It was all about the quirky and cringy characters. But with Borderlands 3, they, well, crossed the line. And it was a pretty difficult line to cross, but they did it. The entire game story was cringe through and through, and it felt like a 14-year-old worked on it. And biggest issue was, of course, the villains. The Calypso twins were completely awful, especially if you were going to compare it with the Handsome Jack from the previous game. They don't have really fleshed out motives, they're just plain out just bad guys. They're not formidable, they're dumb, they're cringe. And yeah, you kind of don't respect an enemy, and when you don't respect an enemy, you kind of don't care about it anymore. And not just twins, practically every single other character was butchered in this game. The characters from the previous games that were killed for completely no reason and with no real payoff. The characters that didn't even show up in the game, or if they did practically nothing. And everything, and an entire game just lacked all entire emotional investment. I cannot find a single person that cared about single character in this game. And don't let me start with Ava. For me, Ava was even worse character than Calypso twins. And probably the worst offender was, well, your own character. Because it seems like that your character was not even the part of the story. You were literally just a, well, camera walking around and killing some people. That's it. In most cutscenes, in most dialogues, it was like you were never there. You could replace yourself with any other character or just simply with an empty space and nothing would change. Except for maybe a few different spots, but well, it wasn't like you were doing absolutely nothing. And this was actually pretty butchering for an experience. Overall, was Borderlands 3 a bad game? No, of course it wasn't. It had a lot of great parts, which we're going to be discussing in the next part of this series. We're going to be talking about why Borderlands 3 is so good. But for many, these bad parts were, well, experience breaking. And many people return to Borderlands 2 because of that, which still holds pretty well. And the good part of the Borderlands 3 is a part of another video and another story. Well, I guess that's it for today. Thank you for being here with me. Like the video if you like it, subscribe for more videos like this one, and I'm gonna see you in the next one.